This is wild HOA situations. I have the paper trail.
I am a court interpreter in Anchorage, Alaska, which means I know exactly how hearings go, what evidence holds up, and when someone is lying to your face. That skill came in handy the day Michelle Stewart decided my contractor's truck was a fire lane violation and called a tow company before I even knew there was a problem. I moved to Pheasant Run Association 3 years ago because the price was right and I needed space for home office work. The HOA seemed normal at first. Standard rules about trash cans, lawn height, and guest parking permits. Then the board started changing enforcement without warning. Suddenly every guest needed a dashboard pass. Then passes had to be registered online. Then the portal started charging fees for duplicates. It felt like someone was rewriting the rulebook every week just to catch people off guard. Michelle Stewart was the Design Review Board vice chair, which meant she could block any exterior modification she did not like, and she treated that power like a personal veto stamp. I had a renovation scheduled, a bathroom remodel that would take 6 weeks and required contractor access every weekday. If the project got delayed, I would lose my deposit and the contractor's availability, which meant thousands of dollars down the drain and another 6 months waiting for the next open slot. That was my stake in this fight. Time, money, and sanity. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in early March. I was standing in my driveway holding a guest pass I had printed from the portal the night before, watching my contractor's white pickup pull into the visitor row across the street. The pass had his plate number, the dates, and the HOA logo at the top. Everything was correct. I walked over to put the pass on his dashboard, and before I could even open the truck door, Michelle came speed walking down the sidewalk with a clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other. She did not say hello. She did not ask what was going on. She just started yelling. "You cannot park there. That is a fire lane. I am calling the tow company right now." I looked at the curb. It was gray. No red paint. No yellow stripes. The parking spaces were clearly marked with white lines, and a sign at the end of the row said visitor parking. I held up the guest pass. This is visitor parking. I have a pass. He is my contractor. She shook her head like I had just said something insane. I do not negotiate with violations. That truck is blocking emergency access. The tow company is 3 minutes out. I pointed at the curb again. There is no red paint. There is no fire lane marking. This is designated visitor parking. She tapped her clipboard. The ordinance was updated last month. This entire row is now considered emergency access. You did not get the notice? I did not get any notice. And I checked the portal this morning. Nothing about fire lanes. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that makes you want to check your wallet. Well, ignorance is not an excuse. The truck gets towed, and you will owe the HOA a fine for non-compliance. Plus the tow yard fees, obviously. My contractor got out of his truck looking confused. He was a big guy, ex-military, and he did not rattle easily, but even he seemed thrown by the sudden aggression. What is going on? Michelle pointed at him like he was trespassing. You need to move that vehicle immediately, or it will be impounded. He looked at me. I nodded. Just move it for now. I will handle this. He got back in and drove down the block to street parking, which was technically allowed but limited to 2 hours. Michelle watched him go, then turned back to me. You are lucky I am feeling generous today. Next time it is an automatic tow. No warnings. She walked away before I could respond, her clipboard tucked under her arm and her phone already at her ear. I stood there in the drizzle, holding a useless guest pass and realizing I had just entered a fight I did not sign up for. I went back inside and opened the HOA portal on my laptop. I searched for fire lane updates, ordinance changes, board meeting minutes, anything that would explain what Michelle was talking about. Nothing. The visitor parking rules were the same as they had been 6 months ago. Print a pass, display it on the dashboard, good for up to 14 consecutive days per guest. No mention of fire lanes. No mention of emergency access restrictions. I checked my email. No HOA notices in the last 60 days except a reminder about trash pickup on holidays. I called the management company. The receptionist put me on hold for 8 minutes, then transferred me to a compliance officer named Greg who sounded like he was eating lunch. Yeah, I heard about that. Michelle filed a report this morning. Said you were blocking a fire lane. There is no fire lane, I said. The curb is not marked. The parking spaces are striped. There is a visitor parking sign right there. Greg sighed. Look, if the board says it is a fire lane, it is a fire lane. You can file a dispute if you want, but that takes 30 days and you still have to comply in the meantime. Comply with what? A rule that does not exist? He hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling that familiar courtroom instinct kick in. Something was wrong. Michelle was not enforcing a rule, she was inventing one. And the way she smiled when she mentioned the fine told me this was not about safety or compliance. This was about control. And probably money. I decided to do what I always do when someone lies to me in a legal setting. Start building a paper trail. I printed every page of the current HOA rules from the portal and saved a time-stamped PDF. I took photos of the visitor parking row from 4 different angles, showing the gray curb, the white striping, and the sign. I downloaded the guest pass I had generated and saved the confirmation email. Then I sent a formal written request to the management company, asking for a copy of any fire lane ordinance updates, board meeting minutes from the last 6 months, and the current towing policy. Greg responded 2 hours later with a form letter. Records requests require a processing fee of $75 and a 30-day review period. Payment must be submitted in advance. That was the first retaliatory records denial. I paid the fee anyway and documented it. The next morning, I woke up to find chalk marks on my contractor's rear tire. He had moved the truck back to the visitor row at 6 in the morning because he needed to unload materials, and someone had already tagged it like a parking enforcement sweep. I went outside and took a photo of the chalk, then checked the time on my phone, 7:15. The HOA office did not even open until 9. Michelle appeared at 7:45, walking the perimeter with her clipboard and that same smug look. She saw me standing by the truck and stopped. Still here? He has a guest pass, I said, pointing at the dashboard. She walked up to the driver's side window and peered in. Then she pulled out her phone, took a picture of the pass, and shook her head. This pass is invalid. How? Wrong format. You used the old template. I used the portal template, the one that is live on the website right now. She tapped her screen. The template was updated last night. This one does not count. I felt my jaw tighten. You are telling me the pass I printed 12 hours ago is now invalid because you changed the template overnight without notice? She shrugged. Rules change. You need to keep up. I am being nice by not calling the tow truck right now, but if that vehicle is still here in 1 hour, it is gone. She walked away. I stood there, breathing slowly, and made a decision. I was not going to keep playing defense. I needed to figure out what Michelle was really doing and why she was targeting me specifically. I called my friend Derek, who works at the courthouse in the civil filing office. He is not a lawyer, But he knows how the system works and he has seen every kind of dispute come through. I explained the situation. The fake fire lane claim, the overnight template change, the records denial, the tow threats. Derek listened, then said, "That sounds like a shakedown. If she is changing rules without notice and threatening tows, she is probably running some kind of fee scheme. You need to check if other people are getting the same treatment." How? Talk to your neighbors. Check the neighborhood group chat if there is one. And start documenting every interaction. If she is doing this to you, she is doing it to other people. And that is a pattern. I thanked him and hung up. Then I opened the Pheasant Run Association Facebook group, which I had joined when I moved in but never really used. I scrolled back through the last 2 months of posts. It did not take long to find complaints. One resident said his guest got towed from the visitor row with no warning. Another said she got fined for a truck that was only parked for 20 minutes. A third said the HOA charged her $300 in administrative fees after a tow that she disputed and won. Every single complaint mentioned Michelle Stewart by name. I screenshot the posts and saved them in a folder labeled evidence. Then I started drafting a formal complaint to the management company, laying out every violation, no notice of rule changes, selective enforcement, retaliatory records denial, refusal to provide the towing policy, and manufactured violations using altered dates. Before I could send it, my phone rang. It was my contractor. They just put a boot on my truck. What? I am looking at it right now. Big yellow clamp on the front wheel. There is a sticker on the window that says I have to call a number to get it removed and pay a fee. I will be right there. I grabbed my keys and my phone and ran outside. Sure enough, there was a bright yellow boot locked onto the driver's side front wheel of the contractor's truck, and a neon orange sticker on the windshield with a phone number and a warning about tampering. The sticker had no readable text except the phone number, but the message was clear: pay up or the truck stays. Michelle was standing 20 feet away, talking to a man in a reflective vest who was holding a handheld scanner. She saw me coming and smiled. Problem solved. You cannot just boot a vehicle with a valid guest pass, I said. The pass was invalid. I explained that. And now the vehicle is in violation of the overnight parking rule. He has been here for 2 hours. It is not overnight. She tapped her clipboard. The rule is 24 hours or more requires a permit. Under 24 hours requires board approval for each instance. You did not get approval. That is not in the rule book. She leaned in. I can make this a lean conversation in one email. There it was. The threat. The line she was going to regret. I did not argue. I just pulled out my phone and started recording. Say that again. She stepped back. You are not allowed to record me. I am on HOA property and you just threatened to put a lien on my house. I am absolutely allowed to record this. The man in the reflective vest looked uncomfortable. He muttered something into a radio and walked back to a white van with amber lights on the roof. Michelle glared at me, then turned and followed him. I stopped recording and called Derek again. She just threatened a lien. On camera. What do I do? File the complaint now, he said. Send it to the management company and copy the entire board. Then send a follow-up email requesting an emergency hearing. If they refuse, you file in small claims and request an injunction. But do it fast, because if she actually files a lien, it is going to cost you a lot more to fight. I sent the complaint from my phone, standing in the drizzle next to a booted truck. I copied every board member I could find in the portal directory, plus Greg at the management company. I attached the video, the photos of the unmarked curb, the screenshots from the neighborhood group, and the time-stamped rulebook PDF. I ended with a request for an immediate hearing and a suspension of all enforcement actions until the dispute was resolved. Greg responded in 10 minutes. Your request is denied. Enforcement actions are valid and will continue. You may file a formal appeal at the next board meeting in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. By then, my contractor would be gone, the renovation would be dead, and I would owe thousands in fees and delays. I called my contractor and told him to get a locksmith to remove the boot. He hesitated. That is not legal. Neither is booting a truck with a valid pass, I said. I will pay for it. Just get it off. He made a call. 20 minutes later, a locksmith showed up with a portable angle grinder and cut the boot shackle in 90 seconds. The contractor drove away before Michelle could come back. I knew I had just escalated things, but I did not care. I was done playing by rules that did not exist. If you are enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama and neighborhood chaos. That night, I got an email from the management company with the subject line "Final Notice." It said I owed $850 in fines, $300 for the invalid guest pass, $200 for tampering with enforcement equipment, $200 for unauthorized vehicle removal, and $150 in administrative fees. Payment was due in 14 days or the HOA would file a lien. I forwarded the email to Derek. He called me back immediately. They are trying to bury you in fees, so you either pay or give up. Do not do either. File in small claims tomorrow and request a hearing. Bring everything you have, the video, the photos, the screenshots, the rulebook PDF, and the email trail. If the judge sees a pattern of retaliation and manufactured violations, they will shut this down fast. I filed the next morning. The clerk gave me a hearing date 3 weeks out, which was still faster than waiting for the next HOA board meeting. I paid the filing fee and got a case number. Then I sent a courtesy copy of the filing to Greg and every board member, letting them know I was taking this to court. The response was immediate. Greg called me an hour later. You need to withdraw that filing. This is an internal HOA matter. Taking it to court is a violation of the dispute resolution clause in your CC&Rs. The dispute resolution clause requires good faith mediation, I said. You denied my records request, you refused an emergency hearing, and you are threatening a lien based on rules that do not exist. That is not good faith. He hung up. 2 hours later, Michelle showed up at my front door with a board member I had never met before, a middle-aged man in a polo shirt who introduced himself as Tom and said he was there to observe and stay neutral. Michelle did not bother with pleasantries. You are in breach of your HOA agreement. If you do not withdraw the court filing and pay the outstanding fines, we will proceed with the lien and you will be responsible for all legal fees. I crossed my arms. Show me the fire lane ordinance. Show me the updated guest pass template. Show me the overnight parking rule. Show me anything in writing that proves these violations are real. She held up her clipboard. This is my documentation. I have photos, timestamps, and witness statements. From who? She did not answer. Instead, she handed me a single sheet of paper with a list of dates and alleged violations. The first date was 2 weeks before my contractor even started. The second date was a Saturday when I was out of town and no one was parked in the visitor row. The third date was yesterday, but the photo attached showed a different truck with a different plate. This is fake, I said. These dates do not match. These photos are not my contractor's truck. Michelle snatched the paper back. You are calling me a liar? I am calling this evidence fabricated, and I am going to show it to a judge. Tom cleared his throat. Maybe we should all take a step back and try to work this out. Michelle shot him a look that could melt steel. There is nothing to work out. He is in violation, and he is going to pay. She turned and walked away. Tom lingered for a second, looking uncomfortable, then followed her. I went back inside and called Derek. They just showed me fake evidence. Different trucks, wrong dates, everything. That is fraud, he said. If they are backdating notices to manufacture late fees, that is a crime. You need to report this to the management company in writing and tell them you have proof. If they do not act, you go to the state attorney general. I drafted the email immediately, attaching side-by-side comparisons of the violation photos and my own time-stamped photos showing the discrepancies. I sent it to Greg, the board president, and every board member I could find. I ended with a formal demand: suspend all enforcement, provide copies of all alleged violation evidence, and schedule an emergency meeting to address the fraud. Greg responded 2 hours later. We have reviewed your claims and found them without merit. All enforcement actions are valid and will proceed. That was it. No investigation. No meeting. Just a flat denial. I forwarded the email to Derek. He called me back immediately. They are not going to fix this internally. You need to go public. Post everything in the neighborhood group. Let people see what is happening. If enough residents complain, the management company will have to act. I hesitated. Going public meant burning bridges. It meant making enemies. But I was already past that point. I posted everything in the Pheasant Run Association Facebook group. The video of Michelle threatening Aline, the photos of the unmarked curb, the fake violation evidence, the records denial, the overnight template change, and the email trail showing the management company's refusal to investigate. I ended with a simple question. Has this happened to you? The responses came in fast. Within an hour, 12 people had commented with their own stories. One resident said Michelle towed his mother's car during a family emergency. Another said she got fined 3 times in 1 week for the same alleged violation. A third said the HOA charged him $900 in administrative fees after he disputed a fine and won. Every single story involved Michelle Stewart. By the end of the day, the post had 60 comments, and someone had created a Google Doc where people could add their complaints. The document filled up with names, dates, photos, and copies of violation notices. A pattern emerged. Michelle was targeting specific residents, usually people who had recently started renovation projects or filed complaints about other issues. The violations were always parking related, always sudden, and always expensive. Derek called me that night. You just opened the floodgates. If even half of those complaints are real, the management company is looking at a massive liability. They are going to have to act. 2 days later, Greg sent an email to the entire community. It said the board was aware of concerns regarding parking enforcement and was conducting an internal review. All pending fines were temporarily suspended, and all tow authorizations were frozen pending the outcome of the review. I read it twice, looking for the catch. There was not one. The HOA had just blinked. But Michelle was not done. The next morning, I woke up to find my contractor's truck back in the visitor row, and a tow truck backing up to it with amber lights flashing and the wheel lift already extended. I ran outside in my pajamas, yelling for them to stop. The driver, a wiry guy in a stained hoodie, ignored me and started positioning the lift under the front wheels. Michelle was standing on the sidewalk holding her phone and filming. Unauthorized vehicle. No valid permit. Time to go. I pulled out my phone and called 911. I told the dispatcher there was an illegal tow in progress and gave the address. The dispatcher said an officer would be there in 10 minutes. The driver heard me and stopped. He looked at Michelle. She nodded. Keep going. He hesitated, then started raising the lift. The front wheels came off the ground. I stepped in front of the truck. If you tow this vehicle, I am filing a theft report and you will be named as an accessory. The driver looked at Michelle again. She did not flinch. Do your job. He shook his head and lowered the lift. Not worth it. He unhooked the chains, climbed back in the cab, and drove off. Michelle turned on me, her face red. You just cost me a contract. You just tried to steal a truck, I said. A police cruiser pulled up 30 seconds later. The officer, a calm-looking woman in her 40s, got out and asked what was going on. I explained the situation, the suspended enforcement order, the unauthorized tow attempt, Michelle's threats. The officer took notes, then asked Michelle for her side. Michelle said the truck was in violation and she had every right to authorize a tow. The officer looked at the visitor parking sign, then at the unmarked curb, then back at Michelle. Where is the fire lane? Michelle pointed at the row of parked cars. This is emergency access. The officer frowned. I do not see any markings. Do you have documentation? Michelle held up her clipboard. I have board authorization. The officer shook her head. That is not how fire lanes work. If there is no marking, there is no violation. If you try to tow another vehicle without a valid legal basis, I will cite you for filing a false report. Michelle opened her mouth, then closed it. The officer turned to me. Do you want to press charges? I thought about it. Not yet. But I want this documented. The officer wrote up a report and gave me a copy. She told Michelle to leave and not come back without a legitimate enforcement reason. Michelle walked away without another word, but I could see her jaw working like she was chewing glass. I went back inside and added the police report to my evidence folder. Then I texted Derek. Police just shut down a tow attempt. Officer said Michelle was filing false reports. Derek responded immediately. That is your trump card. When you go to court, bring that police report. If Michelle has been authorizing illegal tows, she is personally liable, and the HOA is going to throw her under the bus to avoid a lawsuit. I did not chase her accusations after that, because I already had the receipts. I had the video of her threatening a lien. I had the fake violation evidence. I had the police report. I had the neighborhood complaints. I had the time-stamped rulebook PDF proving no fire lane rule existed. And I had one more thing Michelle did not know about. A certified mail trail. 3 weeks earlier, right after the first tow threat, I had sent a certified letter to the HOA requesting copies of all enforcement policies, meeting minutes, and rule changes. I got a signed receipt proving they received it. 2 weeks later, I sent a follow-up letter requesting confirmation that my guest passes were valid and asking for clarification on the fire lane claim. I got another signed receipt. The HOA never responded to either letter. Instead, they kept fining me, kept threatening tows, and kept pretending the fire lane rule existed. That was the smoking gun. If they had received my certified letters asking for the rules and then fined me anyway without providing the rules, that was not just bad management. That was intentional fraud. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I showed up with a folder full of evidence, a printed timeline, and Derek as my witness. Michelle showed up with Greg from the management company and a lawyer in a cheap suit who looked like he did not want to be there. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, asked me to present my case. I walked her through the timeline, the sudden fire lane claim with no markings, the overnight template change, the records denial, the fake violation evidence, the police report, and the certified mail receipts. I showed her the video of Michelle threatening a lien. I showed her the neighborhood complaints. I showed her the time-stamped rulebook PDF proving the fire lane rule did not exist. Then I handed her the certified mail receipts. Your Honor, I said, the HOA received 2 certified letters from me requesting clarification on the parking rules and proof of the fire lane ordinance. They never responded. Instead, they continued to fine me and threaten tows based on rules that do not exist. That is not enforcement. That is fraud. The judge looked at Michelle. Do you have a response? Michelle started to answer, but the lawyer cut her off. Your Honor, we would like to request a continuance to review the evidence. The judge shook her head. You have had 3 weeks to prepare. Answer the question. Do you have documentation proving the fire lane ordinance exists? The lawyer shuffled through his papers. We have board meeting minutes that reference parking enforcement updates. The judge held out her hand. Show me. The lawyer handed her a stack of printed pages. The judge flipped through them, frowning. These minutes do not mention fire lanes. They do not mention guest pass templates. They do not mention overnight parking rules. What they do mention is a general discussion about increasing compliance revenue. She looked up. Is that what this is about? Revenue? The lawyer did not answer. The judge turned to me. Do you have any other evidence? I pulled out my phone and opened the video I had recorded 3 days earlier. It showed Michelle standing in the visitor parking row, pointing at the unmarked curb, and telling a different resident that his car was in violation of a fire lane rule. The resident asked to see the rule in writing. Michelle refused and walked away. I handed the phone to the judge. She watched the video, then set the phone down. This is a pattern of harassment. I am issuing a temporary injunction prohibiting the HOA from enforcing any parking rules that are not clearly documented in the current rulebook and posted on the association website. I am also ordering the HOA to refund all fines collected from the plaintiff and any other residents who were cited for fire lane violations in the last 6 months. Finally, I am ordering the management company to conduct a full audit of all enforcement actions taken by Michelle Stewart and report the findings to this court in 30 days. Michelle stood up. Your Honor, I object. The judge cut her off. You do not get to object. You are not a party to this case. Sit down. Michelle sat. The judge looked at Greg. If I find out your company has been enabling this kind of fraud, I will refer this case to the state attorney general. Do you understand? Greg nodded. Pale. The judge dismissed the case and told me I would receive a written order in 3 days. I walked out of the courtroom feeling like I had just run a marathon. Derek clapped me on the shoulder. You just nuked her. I did not respond. I was too busy thinking about what came next. The written order arrived 2 days later. It was everything the judge had promised. Injunction, refunds, audit, and a stern warning to the management company. I posted a copy in the neighborhood Facebook group. The response was explosive. Within hours, 20 residents had submitted formal complaints to the management company demanding refunds for invalid fines. 5 people said they were considering a class action lawsuit. 3 board members resigned, citing concerns about liability. Michelle tried to fight back. She sent an email to the entire community claiming I had manipulated evidence and lied in court. She said the fire lane rule was real, and the judge had made a mistake. I responded by posting the certified mail receipts and the police report. Then I posted the video of her threatening a lien. Then I posted the fake violation evidence with the side-by-side photo comparisons. She went silent after that. A week later, the management company released the audit results. It confirmed that Michelle had been authorizing tows without valid cause, backdating notices to manufacture late fees, and selectively enforcing rules against residents who had filed complaints. The audit also found that Michelle had been receiving a commission from the tow company for every vehicle towed from HOA property. That was the final piece. Michelle was not just abusing her authority, she was profiting from it. The board called an emergency meeting. I showed up with Derek and half the neighborhood. The meeting room was packed. People were standing in the aisles, sitting on the floor, crowding the doorway. The air was thick with anger. The board president, a tired-looking man in his 60s, opened the meeting by reading a prepared statement. He said the board took the audit findings seriously and was committed to reforming enforcement policies. He said Michelle Stewart had been removed from the design review board and stripped of all enforcement authority. He said the HOA was suspending its relationship with the tow company pending a legal review. Then he opened the floor for comments. One resident stood up and said Michelle had towed her sister's car during a funeral. Another said Michelle had fined him 4 times in 1 month for violations that did not exist. A third said Michelle had blocked his renovation permit because he refused to pay an illegal inspection fee. The stories went on for 40 minutes. Every single one involved Michelle. Finally, someone stood up and made a motion to recall the entire board and hold new elections. The motion was seconded immediately. The board president tried to table it, but the crowd shouted him down. They held a voice vote. It was unanimous. The board was gone. 3 weeks later, new elections were held. The turnout was the highest in the association's history. A slate of reform candidates won every seat. The first thing the new board did was fire the management company and hire a new one. The second thing they did was rewrite the enforcement policies from scratch, adding clear notice requirements, due process protections, and a ban on commission-based tow contracts. Michelle tried to run for a board seat. She got 11 votes out of 300. But the fight was not completely over yet. The tow company sued the HOA for breach of contract, claiming they were owed payment for authorized tows that had been reversed. The new board countersued, arguing the tow company had been complicit in Michelle's fraud by accepting illegal tow authorizations and paying her commissions. I got deposed as part of the lawsuit. I brought every piece of evidence I had: the video, the photos, the police report, the certified mail receipts, the audit findings, and the court order. The tow company's lawyer took one look at the evidence and walked out of the room. 2 days later, they dropped the lawsuit and agreed to refund every resident who had been illegally towed. The case against Michelle was harder. The state attorney general opened an investigation based on the audit findings, but the process was slow. Months went by with no updates. Finally, a year after the courtroom hearing, Michelle was charged with fraud, filing false reports, and accepting illegal kickbacks. She pleaded no contest and was sentenced to probation, community service, and a $10,000 fine. She moved out of Pheasant Run 3 months later. Derek called me the day the charges were filed. You did it. You took down a corrupt HOA board, exposed a fraud scheme, and got justice for half the neighborhood. I did not feel victorious. I just felt tired. But the neighborhood was better. The new board was transparent, responsive, and fair. Enforcement was consistent, and rule changes were announced weeks in advance with clear documentation. Guest parking was easy again. My contractor finished the renovation on schedule. And every time I walked past the visitor parking row, I looked at the unmarked gray curb and remembered the day Michelle tried to invent a fire lane and call it compliance. The best part came 6 months later, when the new board released an updated enforcement manual. On page 12, in bold letters, was a new rule: all fire lane designations must be clearly marked with red curbing and posted signage in accordance with municipal code. Violations may only be enforced if the markings are visible and compliant. Right below it was a note. This rule was added in response to a complaint to the management company that triggers discipline and corrective action to prevent selective enforcement. That was my payback vector, spelled out in black and white. Michelle got stripped of access to the portal admin tools, her enforcement authority, and her board position. The HOA froze enforcement pending a policy rewrite, exactly like the judge ordered. And the funny karma beat came during the board recall meeting, when someone pulled up the original parking ordinance and proved that Michelle had been citing a city code section that explicitly defined fire lanes as requiring posted signage and red paint. She had insisted it was a fire lane issue, but the actual curb markings and ordinance proved she was wrong. She had been so confident in her fake rule that she never bothered to check the real one. The look on her face when the resident read the ordinance out loud in front of 200 people was worth every hour I spent building the case. I ran into Tom, the board member who had pretended to be neutral a few months after the recall. He was loading groceries into his car in the parking lot of a supermarket. He saw me and nodded. I just wanted to say I am sorry I did not speak up sooner. I knew Michelle was out of control, but I did not think anyone would do anything about it. I shrugged. You could have, but you did not. He looked away. Yeah. I know. I got in my car and drove home. Pheasant Run looked different now. The signs were clearer. The rules were posted online with timestamps and revision histories. The visitor parking row had fresh white striping and a new sign that said guest passes available online, no fee. It felt like a real neighborhood again, instead of a place where normal life becomes a parking violation. My contractor called me a year later. He was working on another project in a different HOA community and ran into parking trouble. He asked if I had any advice. I told him to document everything, get it in writing, and never assume the HOA is acting in good faith. If they threaten a tow, ask for the rule in writing. If they deny it, file a complaint immediately. And if they retaliate, go public. He laughed. You sound like you have been through this before. Once was enough, I said. But the truth is, I would do it again. Because the alternative is letting people like Michelle run unchecked, inventing rules, profiting from enforcement, and turning neighborhoods into personal fiefdoms. Someone has to push back. And sometimes, that someone is a court interpreter with a clipboard, a camera, and a very good memory for lies. 2 years later, I sold my house and moved to a neighborhood without an HOA. No rules, no enforcement, no design review board, just people living their lives, parking wherever they wanted, painting their doors any color they chose. It was quiet. It was boring. It was perfect. But every time I see a guest parking sign, I think about Michelle standing in the drizzle with her clipboard and her fake rules. So sure she had all the power. So convinced no one would challenge her. And I think about the day she realized she was wrong. That memory never gets old. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.